So in the last video I talked about what's called a Peruvian tax or a Peruvian subsidy, and we didn't really go too in depth into what that is, so that's what we're going to do in this video. So first, the word Peruvian just comes from an economist who is named Arthur Cecil, so I'm just going to write Arthur C. Pigou, and so just Pigou was his last name. And he was the first person to come up with this idea, and so that's why it's called a Peruvian tax or Peruvian subsidy. So I've just drawn our normal negative externality diagram here. So we have a factory that its costs are represented by the marginal cost sub P line, which stands for private. So I'll just write out private. Excuse me. And then the cost that it imposed to society is that it issues a ton of smoke, which then goes on to the rest of society. So the difference between the marginal cost, the private marginal cost line, and the society's marginal cost line is the value of the externality. That's the cost of the externality, which in this example would be the smoke that it produces. So to find out how much we should tax to internalize this externality, what you do is you go to the point where the society's cost curve is equal to demand, and then you go down to the private cost curve, and that's the amount of tax. So the tax should be $3 minus $1 or $2 per unit of output. So the tax is equal to 3, which is just coming from right here, minus 1. And remember, these are all dollars. So that's just $2 per unit of output, per unit of Q. Or I'll just put, I'll just write per Q. So in this case, that could be like $2 per ton of bricks. Let's just say that this is measured in ton of bricks. So what that will do is that will force the firm to, it'll start right here, and I should do this in a different color. So the firm will start right here at point A, and it will be producing 10 tons of bricks and billowing all this smoke out into the surrounding neighborhood. And then the government's going to come along and say, okay, now you have to pay a tax of $2 per ton of bricks that you produce. So that goes ahead and it shifts this marginal cost sub private, the private marginal cost curve, it shifts it up to the society's marginal cost curve. So this is the effect of the tax. And then what the firm says is they say, oh shoot, our costs are higher at this point right here. We can call this point D. Our costs are higher than what we can charge in the market. We can only charge $2 per ton of bricks, or maybe this is $200 or $2,000. I don't know what's really realistic. But we can only charge $2, and because of this tax, we're having to pay, if this was $2 and the tax is $2, then this would be $4. So they say, oh shoot, I would be making a loss in this scenario. So I'm going to go ahead and produce less and charge a little bit more. And so they're going to keep on producing less and less until they get down to this point here at B, where they charge $3, they're taxed $2, the government collects, I'm just going to color this in really quickly, the government collects this amount of taxes, and they produce at the optimal level, which is point B. So that's really all that there is to a Peruvian tax. Here I made the Peruvian tax on output. So I'm going to say this is a tax on Q, which is just per unit of output. And all that I want to say here is that the government can just impose a lump sum tax as well. They could just charge, let's see, the area of this rectangle, is 2. This has a height of 2. And then it's 5 across, so that would be $10 or $10,000, whatever unit we're measuring. So the government could also just impose a lump sum tax of that much. And that would have some different implications, but I don't want to go into those right here. Just know that that's also referred to as a Peruvian tax. So the one that I'm most familiar with and that I've seen the most is a tax per unit of output, which is the one that I demonstrated here. So I think that that should be good for you to just be familiarized with the ideas. So now we're going to go, so this was all a Peruvian tax. So now we're going to go over to the right and we're going to do a Peruvian subsidy. So a Peruvian tax applies to a negative externality, so I'm going to put a little negative up here, whereas a Peruvian subsidy applies to a positive externality. So we're going to talk about the market for flowers, or in general, landscaping. And so we're going to have the price and the quantity here, and then we are going to have the marginal cost here, and then we are going to have the private demand. And then remember, there's a positive externality, so we are going to have a demand for society that is greater. Excuse me, and you probably can't see that part right on the right, so I'll scoot this over just a little bit. And if you can't read this over on the right here, that just says society. So you know what, we'll do this. Much better. So the story here is that both you enjoy your flowers, and so that's how much you're willing to pay. You're willing to pay up to, I'll change colors here really quick. You're willing to pay this price, PA, and buy this much of landscaping. So let's, you know what, I'm actually going to give these all numbers. So let's say that this is $5, and then I'm just going to put, maybe this is 10 acres in general. I don't really know what unit I should measure landscaping in, but let's just say that this is 10. So now, not only you enjoy your landscaping, but all of your neighbors enjoy your landscaping also. So they would be willing to pay a little bit to make sure that you have nice landscaping. So that increases the demand because they are willing to pay a little bit to make sure that your landscaping is nice so that they can look at it as they drive by or as they sit in their front yard and look out at the neighborhood. So that's an increase in demand going over here, and I'm not going to leave that up there because this picture may get a little crowded. But just know that then this is the point B is the societally optimal equilibrium. So let's say then that this is $10 and that this is a quantity of 15 units of landscaping or of flowers. So what the government can do is that it can give a subsidy of, let's go ahead and say that this point over here is $3. So they can pay a subsidy of 10 minus 3, or $7. This is the Peruvian subsidy. And so here's the story. You're only willing to pay $5. And at this, for the private benefits of flowers. But the societally optimal place is where there are 15 units of landscaping and that costs $10 to be able to produce. So what the government does is, at this point, to have 15 units of landscaping, to have people pay enough to get 15 units of landscaping in, let's say, your neighborhood, you would have to make landscaping cheap enough to make it only $3. So this $3 over here, I'm going to change colors one more time. This is the price people will buy 15 landscaping. We'll buy 15 units. We'll buy 15 Q. I'll just say Q. So that's $3. So we have to find a way to make landscaping $3, but still pay the suppliers $10 because that's what it costs. So it costs $10 for 15 Q. So what the government can do to make up this difference, so the government can subsidize $7. So the firms get $10, get a price of $10, and the people only pay what they're willing to pay, which is $3. And so then the value of the subsidy will be a $7 per unit of landscaping or per unit of flowers. But then the total value of the subsidy will be this rectangle here. It'll be 7 times 15. And I'll just do this out really quickly just to get an answer. 7 times 5 is 35, if I'm not mistaken. So that'll be $105 of subsidy. Now, you may ask, where's this money coming from? And that's a great question. So that's one of the kind of, I don't want to say problems, but I want to say areas of debate about Peruvian taxes and subsidies, is over in the Peruvian tax scenario, we say the government is raising this $10 in tax revenue. What should they do with it? And so the generic answer is that they should give it back to the people that are harmed by the externalities of the factory, or they should use it to cease the externalities of the factory. So they should put it towards, developing cleaner filters for the factory. Now, on the other hand, where does this money come from over on the subsidy area? Because this is money that the government has to pay out. The government has to pay out $105. And so the generic answer is that it should come from the homeowners in this situation. So it should come from the homeowners, and then it should be reinvested in their neighborhood. But obviously there's some kind of hesitation about that from economists, because now we're not only disturbing market equilibriums, but we're also telling people what they should choose, and it's really, really, really hard to estimate what the demand for landscaping is. So a government would have to go estimate what this demand is for society, and then to say this estimation is absolutely correct, and then to charge people and tax based on that estimation, kind of makes some economists nervous. So I just wanted to bring that point up, and it makes me kind of nervous. I don't really know that I agree with that too much. In fact, I really don't agree with it too much. And there are lots of other alternatives. So a Peruvian tax or a subsidy is one more alternative, and I just wanted to display it to you here in its semi-formal manner. This is really as formal of a manner as I think you'll ever need to work with it, and these are all the tools that you have to show it. So at this point, I think that this is a wonderful introduction to Peruvian taxes and subsidies, and I hope that that was clear.